The breaking point. The Cravaxian Empire had ruled the Andromeda sector for 12,000 years. Their crystalline warships moved through space like shards of frozen lightning, and wherever they went, worlds bent the knee or burned to ash. Commander Theron Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the merchant vessel Prairie Wind, watching the blue-green marble of Earth grow smaller in the viewport. His wife, Dr. Ilara Chin, stood beside him, her hand trembling in his. "They said we have 72 hours, Ilara whispered. Theron's jaw tightened. 3 days. That's all the Cravaxians had given humanity to surrender completely, to dismantle every government, every military, every shred of sovereignty, or face what they called systematic cleansing. It had started 6 months ago when the first Cravaxian scout ship emerged from a wormhole near Jupiter. They hadn't asked for peace. They hadn't proposed trade. They had simply transmitted a single message across every human communication channel. You exist in territory claimed by the Cravaxian Empire. Submit or be removed. Earth's governments had tried diplomacy. The Cravaxians responded by glassing the colony on Titan, turning it into a crater of molten ice. 2 million souls gone in minutes. Now, as evacuation ships scattered across the solar system like frightened birds, Theron watched his homeworld, defiant, desperate and utterly outmatched, prepare for war. Admiral Kaida Okonkwo's voice crackled over the ship's intercom. All civilian vessels, this is Earth Defense Command. Maintain your course to the rendezvous point at Proxima Station. We will hold them here. We will buy you time. Theron knew what that meant. The Admiral and her fleet of 300 ships were about to face the Cravaxian Armada, 12,000 warships that had conquered 100 worlds. They're going to die, Ilara said, her voice breaking. They're going to fight, Theron corrected. That's what we do. On Earth's moon, in a bunker buried 2 miles beneath the surface, Dr. Rains Holloway frantically worked at his console. Around him, a dozen scientists moved with desperate purpose. The project they'd been building in secret for 5 years wasn't ready. It was supposed to take another decade. But time had just run out. The quantum calculations are unstable, his assistant, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, warned. If we activate it now, there's a 60% chance it tears apart the solar system. Rains didn't look up from his screen. And what's the chance if we don't activate it? Yuki fell silent. The weapon they'd built wasn't like anything humanity had ever created. It didn't fire bullets or missiles. It didn't even exist in normal space. It was something far stranger, born from the desperate marriage of quantum physics and human stubbornness. Rains called it the null engine. Others called it humanity's final prayer. Above Earth, the Cravaxian fleet emerged from hyperspace like a storm of diamonds. Their flagship, the Eternal Dominion, dwarfed anything humans had ever built. Its hull was carved from a single massive crystal that refracted starlight into rainbow daggers. On the bridge, High Commander Zux Thar observed the primitive human fleet assembling between his armada and their homeworld. His translator implant rendered their communications into his language, and what he heard made his mandibles click in amusement. They're playing music, his tactical officer reported. Indeed, the human ships were broadcasting something. A stirring melody with drums and horns, some ancient war song from their history. Zux Thar found it quaint. Every species did something like this before the end. Some prayed. Some sang. It never mattered. Open fire, he commanded. Spare the planet until they witness their fleet's destruction. I want them to understand the price of defiance. The space between Earth and the Cravaxian Armada erupted in violence. Human railguns spat tungsten slugs at relativistic speeds. Missiles trailing plasma exhaust spiraled toward their targets. The Cravaxians responded with coherent energy beams that sliced through hulls like paper. Admiral Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Unbroken Dawn, her hands gripping the command rail as explosions blossomed across her tactical display. Ships winked out, each one a crew of 500 souls, gone in an instant. "Ma'am, we've lost the Roosevelt and the Beijing," her tactical officer shouted over the alarms. "All ships, pattern Delta 7. Okonkwo ordered. "Get them close. Make them bleed for every meter." The human fleet surged forward in a desperate gambit, abandoning defensive formations to close the distance. If they couldn't outgun the enemy, they'd ram them. They'd board them. They'd tear them apart with their bare hands if necessary. On the moon, alarms shrieked through Dr. Holloway's lab. "The flagship is charging its planet-killer weapon," Yuki shouted. "Impact in 90 seconds. Rain stared at his screen. The null engine's calculations were still cascading through probabilities, trying to find a stable configuration. 58% chance of catastrophic failure. 59%. The numbers climbed slowly. 60 seconds. He thought about his daughter, Sarah, aboard an evacuation ship somewhere in the dark. She was only 7. She liked to draw pictures of stars. 40 seconds. 63% chance of failure. Dr. Holloway. Yuki grabbed his shoulder. We're out of time. 20 seconds. Rains closed his eyes and thought about every human who had ever looked up at the night sky and wondered what was out there. They'd reached for the stars with such hope. And the stars had sent them this. He opened his eyes. Activate the null engine. His finger stabbed the command key. For one eternal moment, nothing happened. Then reality screamed. The weapon that shouldn't exist. The null engine activated with a sound that human ears weren't designed to process. A deep, vibrating wrongness that existed somewhere between thunder and silence. Every instrument on Earth and throughout the lunar facility registered the same impossible reading. The local quantum field was collapsing inward. Dr. Rains Holloway watched his screens fill with cascading errors. The device buried in the moon's core wasn't just manipulating spacetime. It was rewriting the fundamental rules about what matter could and couldn't do. God help us, Yuki whispered beside him. It's actually working. In the space between Earth and the Cravaxian Armada, a point of absolute darkness appeared. Not the darkness of empty space but something deeper, a sphere of nothing that grew like a spreading wound. High Commander Zewexthar's confident expression shattered as his sensors went haywire. What is that? Unknown phenomenon, Commander? His science officer clicked frantically at his console. It's not a weapon. It's not anything. Our scans show it doesn't exist, but it's... The first Cravaxian warship touched the edge of the expanding sphere and simply ceased to be. No explosion. No debris. One moment it was there, and the next, the universe forgot it had ever existed. Evasive maneuvers. Zewexthar screamed. But the sphere was growing exponentially, doubling in size every second. 10 ships vanished. Then 50. Then 200. The magnificent crystalline vessels that had terrorized 100 worlds met something they couldn't comprehend: pure negation. Admiral Okonkwo watched from the unbroken dawn as the impossible unfolded. All ships full reverse. Get away from that thing. The human fleet scrambled backward as the sphere expanded, its edge now kilometers wide. It consumed everything: Cravaxian ships, human debris, even stray atoms of hydrogen. The sphere grew darker with each consumption, as if feeding on reality itself. Ma'am, we're detecting massive gravitational distortions, her science officer reported, voice shaking. That thing it's like a black hole, but it's not. It's the opposite of existence. On the Eternal Dominion, panic had replaced Cravaxian discipline. Zewexthar watched his mighty armada scatter like insects before a storm. The sphere had grown to encompass a volume the size of Earth's moon, and it showed no signs of stopping. Calculate probability of fleet survival if we enter hyperspace from current position, he demanded. 43%, Commander. The spatial distortions. Do it. 3,000 Cravaxian ships activated their hyperspace drives simultaneously. Most made it. 712 didn't, their vessels torn apart as the unstable space caught them mid-transition. The debris was immediately swallowed by the growing sphere of nothing. In his lunar bunker, Rains stared at his screens in horror. The null engine was supposed to create a localized field that would disable the Cravaxian weapons for a few hours, just long enough for the fleet to make a tactical retreat. Instead, he'd created something that was erasing reality itself. Shut it down, he shouted. Emergency shutdown now. Yuki's fingers flew across her console. It's not responding. The quantum cascade is self-sustaining. It's feeding on the vacuum energy of space itself. Rains felt ice flood his veins. He'd made a mistake. A fundamental, catastrophic mistake. The theory had been sound, but theory and reality were proving to be very different things. The null engine wasn't just a weapon. It was a cancer in the fabric of existence. How long until it reaches Earth? He asked quietly. Yuki's calculations ran. Her face went pale. 7 hours at current expansion rate. Admiral Okonkwo received the same information on her tactical display. 7 hours until the sphere consumed Earth, the Moon, and every human still in the inner solar system. Her communications officer was receiving frantic transmissions from the planet below. Millions of messages, all asking the same question. What had they done? But Okonkwo was a military officer. While others panicked, she calculated. Get me Dr. Holloway on secure channel. And someone find out if that thing follows conventional physics or if we're dealing with something completely new. Theron Vasquez watched from the observation deck of the Prairie Wind as the civilian convoy fled outward toward the rendezvous point. Behind them, Earth was a blue jewel with a spreading black cancer beside it. Ilara gripped his hand. Is that our weapon? I don't know, Theron admitted. But I know we're not going back. The convoy's commander, Captain Marcus Vale, addressed all vessels. I know you all have family back there. I know you want answers. But our orders are clear. Get every civilian to safety. The military will handle this. They always do. But Theron had served in the military for 15 years before becoming a merchant captain. He knew what the military will handle this really meant. It meant good people were about to die trying to fix an unfixable problem. Somewhere in deep space the Cravaxian fleet regrouped. High Commander Zewexthar's mandibles trembled with a mixture of fear and rage he'd never experienced before. His crew worked in shocked silence, still processing what they'd witnessed. Status report, he demanded. His tactical officer's response was grim. We've lost 4,218 vessels. The humans have deployed a weapon that our science cannot explain. Our analysts believe it's some form of controlled quantum collapse, but the mathematics don't. I don't care about mathematics. Zewexthar roared. Can we destroy it? Silence answered him. Finally, his chief scientist spoke. Commander, we can't destroy something that isn't real. That sphere doesn't exist in conventional spacetime. Weapons pass through it, energy dissipates around it. It's not matter, it's not energy. It's absence. Zewexthar stared at the view screen showing that growing sphere of darkness. For 12,000 years, the Cravaxian Empire had crushed every species that dared resist. They had weapons that could shatter planets, technology that bent space to their will. But they'd never encountered anything like this. The humans had built a weapon that attacked reality itself. Back on Earth, President Sarah Okafor addressed her remaining staff in the deep bunker beneath Geneva. Communications with the moon base had confirmed the worst. The null engine couldn't be shut down and it would reach Earth in less than 7 hours. Evacuation status? She asked. 12% complete, Madam President. We've gotten about 900 million people off-world. The rest. Her aide didn't finish. 8 billion souls. Most would die not from the weapon but from the panic. The communications networks were already collapsing as people fled cities, desperate to reach ships that didn't exist. What about the weapon? Can we do anything? General Marcus Stone, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, shook his head. Dr. Holloway's team is working on it, but the truth is we don't understand what we've created. It's like trying to put a nuclear explosion back in the bomb. President Okafor looked at the faces around the table. Military leaders, scientists, diplomats. All of them afraid. All of them waiting for her to make a decision that might doom humanity as surely as surrender to the Cravaxians would have. Get Dr. Holloway on the line, she said. And someone get me Admiral Okonkwo. If we're going to die, we're going to die understanding what killed us. On the moon, Rains Holloway stared at the equation scrolling across his screen. Somewhere in this quantum mathematics was the answer. There had to be. He'd created this monster, surely he could stop it. But as he worked, a terrible thought occurred to him. What if stopping it was impossible? What if, in humanity's desperate attempt to save itself, he'd built the very thing that would destroy them? Yuki placed a hand on his shoulder. Rains, you need to see this. She pulled up a new set of readings. The sphere's expansion was slowing. Not much, just a fraction of a percent, but it was measurable. It's running out of energy, Yuki said. It's feeding on quantum vacuum fluctuations, but even that's finite in a given space. If we're lucky, it might stop growing before it reaches Earth. And if we're not lucky? Yuki met his eyes. Then we've created the most effective doomsday weapon in human history. High above Earth, Admiral Okonkwo watched the sphere and made calculations of her own. The Cravaxians had retreated, but they'd be back. They always came back. And when they did, they'd find either a dead world or one protected by a weapon so terrible that even approach was suicide. She opened a channel to her fleet. All ships, maintain position. We're not running. Not anymore. Because Kaida Okonkwo had realized something. The sphere was horrifying, yes, but it was also a shield. As long as it existed, no Cravaxian ship would dare come near Earth. Humanity had pushed back. And the cost might be everything they tried to protect. The price of survival. 6 hours remained before the sphere of nothing reached Earth's atmosphere. In bunkers and shelters across the planet, billions of people watched screens showing that expanding darkness, trying to comprehend the end of everything they'd ever known. But Dr. Rains Holloway wasn't watching screens. He was racing through calculations that would have taken a supercomputer weeks to process, his mind sharp with the desperate clarity that comes only when death breathes down your neck. The expansion is definitely slowing, Yuki confirmed, her voice cautious with hope. At current deceleration, it might stabilize before reaching Earth's orbit. Might isn't good enough, Rains muttered. His fingers flew across the keyboard. We need certainty, and we need it 90 minutes ago. The lunar facility shook as another aftershock rolled through. The null engine's activation had done more than tear holes in spacetime. It had destabilized the moon's internal structure. Cracks were spreading through the rock above them. Dr. Holloway, we have President Okafor on secure channel, a technician called out. Rains accepted the call. The president's face appeared on his screen, aged a decade in the past 6 months. Doctor, I need you to tell me the truth. Can you stop this thing? I don't know, Madam President, Rains said. He'd never been good at political answers, and now wasn't the time to start. The null engine has created a self-sustaining quantum collapse. It's like a fire that burns reality itself as fuel. I can try to smother it, but it might not work, Okafor finished. And if it doesn't? Rains looked at Yuki, then back at the screen. Then Earth has approximately 5 hours and 43 minutes left. A long silence followed. When Okafor spoke again, her voice was steel. Then you have 5 hours and 42 minutes to figure it out. Whatever you need, whoever you need, I'll get them for you. Fail and we all die. Succeed and humanity might just have a future. No pressure, Doctor. The connection cut. No pressure, Rains repeated hollowly. Yuki, pull up the original theoretical models. There has to be something we missed, some variable we didn't account for. Aboard the Unbroken Dawn, Admiral Okonkwo was having her own conversation with the impossible. Her chief scientist, Commander Raj Patel, had been analyzing the sphere for the past 4 hours. It's not just destroying matter, Admiral, Raj explained, his dark eyes gleaming with the terrible fascination of a man looking at something that shouldn't exist. It's removing the quantum probability of matter ever having existed in that space. It's retroactively editing reality. In English, Commander. It's not just an eraser, ma'am. It's making the universe forget there was ever anything to erase. Okonkwo absorbed this. Can we weaponize that? Raj blinked. Admiral, that thing might consume our planet in a few hours and you want to... Can we weaponize it? She repeated. Raj studied his data. Theoretically? Yes. If Dr. Holloway can stabilize it, control it, we'd have a weapon that could eliminate anything from existence. No debris, no aftermath, just nothing. But the containment challenge is alone. Work on it, Okonkwo ordered. If we survive the next 6 hours, I want options for the next time the Kryvaxians show up. In the scattered remnants of the Kryvaxian fleet, High Commander Ziwax Thar was learning what it meant to be afraid. His species had evolved past fear millennia ago, engineered it out through careful genetic modification. Fear made warriors hesitate. Fear was weakness. But sitting in his command chair, watching recordings of his ships being erased from reality, Ziwax Thar felt something ancient and primal crawl up his spine. The humans did this with primitive technology, his chief scientist was saying. Our analysis suggests they stumbled upon quantum manipulation by accident while developing defensive shields. They shouldn't even understand the mathematics involved, yet somehow. Enough, Ziwax Thar interrupted. I don't need a lecture on how they achieve the impossible. I need solutions. Can we replicate this weapon? The scientist's crystals dimmed, a Kryvaxian gesture of uncertainty. Commander, we don't dare try. Our simulations show a 97% chance that any attempt to recreate this technology would result in an uncontrolled collapse that could consume the entire sector. Then how do we fight them? Silence answered him. For the first time in Kryvaxian history, they'd encountered a species they couldn't simply overwhelm. On the merchant vessel Prairie Wind, Theron Vasquez stood at the communication station, listening to transmissions from Earth. The airwaves were chaos, emergency broadcasts, prayers, final messages from people who'd accepted death. But among the chaos, one transmission caught his attention. It was encrypted military traffic, and it should have been impossible for a civilian ship to intercept. But Theron still had his old command codes from his Navy days, codes that apparently hadn't been deactivated. Ilara, he called. Come listen to this. His wife joined him at the console. The voice they heard was Admiral Okonkwo's. All military vessels, prepare for Operation Last Stand. If Dr. Holloway cannot stop the sphere, we're going to try something desperate. We're going to fly every ship we have directly into that thing, hoping the mass and energy of our vessels will disrupt the quantum field long enough for it to collapse naturally. Ilara's hand found Theron's. They're going to sacrifice the entire fleet. They're buying time, Theron corrected. Even if it only slows the sphere by an hour, that's another 100,000 people evacuated. He looked at his wife. They'd been married for 12 years, had a son somewhere on one of the colony ships. Theron had promised him they'd all be together again, safe on some distant world where the war couldn't touch them. "I'm going back," Theron said quietly. "What?" "Theron, no. I'm a combat pilot, Alara. I know how to fly those ships, and they're going to need every volunteer they can get." He took her hands. "You go to Proxima Station, find Devon, make sure he's safe. Tell him his father loved him enough to give him a tomorrow." Alara's eyes filled with tears. "I can't lose you." "You won't," Theron lied. "I'm too stubborn to die." He kissed her, memorizing the moment, the taste of salt from her tears, the way she held him like she could keep him safe through sheer force of will. Then he stepped back. "Captain Vale," Theron called over the ship's comm, "this is Vasquez. I'm requesting transfer to a military vessel. I'm volunteering for Operation Last Stand." Vale's voice came back, heavy with understanding. "Request granted, Commander. God go with you." On the moon, Rains had gathered every available scientist into a virtual conference. Faces from around the solar system filled his screens. Quantum physicists from Mars Station, theoretical mathematicians from Europa Base, even 2 Nobel laureates who'd been mining asteroids when the war started. "The problem," Rains explained, his voice hoarse from hours of talking, "is that the null engine has created a feedback loop. It's using the energy released by quantum collapse to power more quantum collapse. We need to interrupt that loop, but every method we've tried either doesn't work or makes things worse." Dr. Amara Osei, a quantum physicist from Accra, spoke up from her bunker beneath the Sahara. "What if we don't try to stop it? What if we give it what it wants?" "Explain," Rains said. "The sphere is feeding on vacuum energy, but it's doing it inefficiently. It's like a fire starved of oxygen. It keeps burning but slowly. What if we flood it with energy? Give it so much that it can't process it all? It might collapse under its own weight." Yuki's face went pale. "You're talking about detonating nuclear weapons inside the sphere." "I'm talking about detonating every nuclear weapon we have," Amara corrected. "Every missile, every warhead, everything in the arsenal. We create an energy density so high that even quantum collapse can't handle it." Silence filled the virtual conference room as everyone absorbed the implications. "It could work," Rain said slowly. "Or it could provide enough energy for the sphere to consume the entire solar system." "We're out of safe options, Dr. Holloway," Amara replied. "We have 3 hours left. I say we go out swinging." President Okafor had been listening to the conference. Her voice cut through the debate. "Dr. Holloway, I need a percentage. What are the odds this works?" Rains closed his eyes and ran the calculations one more time. 43%, Madam President. "And if we do nothing?" 0%. Okafor didn't hesitate. "General Stone, begin Operation Prometheus. I want every nuclear weapon we have prepped and ready to launch into that sphere. We're going to feed the monster until it chokes." High above Earth, Admiral Okonkwo received her orders. Her fleet would deliver the nuclear weapons directly into the heart of the sphere. It was a suicide mission, of course. Getting close enough meant entering the zone where reality itself became uncertain. But as she looked at the faces of her crew, she saw no hesitation. They'd signed up to protect Earth. This was just one more way to do it. "All ships, this is Admiral Okonkwo. Today we teach the universe that humanity doesn't go quietly into the dark. We kick, we scream, and we drag our enemies down with us. Let's show them what happens when you push humans too far." The fleet began its final approach to the sphere of nothing, nuclear weapons armed and ready. Behind them, Earth held its breath. Ahead of them, darkness waited. And in his lunar bunker, Rains Holloway whispered a prayer to gods he didn't believe in, begging them to let this impossible plan work. Because if it didn't, in 3 hours there would be no one left to pray. Into the void. The nuclear arsenal of humanity amounted to 14,000 warheads, remnants from old Earth wars, deterrents that were never supposed to be used, and new weapons designed to crack alien hulls. Now, all of them were being loaded onto Admiral Okonkwo's ships for a purpose their creators had never imagined. Commander Theron Vasquez strapped himself into the cockpit of a Raptor-class fighter aboard the carrier Valiant Defiance. Around him, 300 other pilots did the same. Most were military. Some, like him, were volunteers who'd turned their civilian ships around and raced back to join the final stand. "All pilots, this is Strike Leader Kowalski," a voice crackled over the comm, "you know the mission. We escort the payload ships to the sphere's edge, then we paint targets with our designators while they drop their loads. Anything that comes out of that darkness, we hit it hard. Questions? Silence answered. There were no questions left to ask. Theron ran through his pre-flight checklist with muscle memory born from 10,000 hours of combat flight time. His hands moved across controls he'd once sworn never to touch again after leaving the service. His wife was somewhere behind him now, racing towards safety. His son would grow up without a father. But maybe he'd grow up at all. That had to be enough. On the bridge of the Unbroken Dawn, Admiral Okonkwo watched her tactical display as the fleet formed up. 72 capital ships, 200 destroyers, and 300 fighters, everything that remained of Earth's defensive forces. Behind them, another wave prepared. If this failed, they'd try again. And again. Until either the sphere stopped or there were no ships left. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the sphere," her communications officer reported, confusion in his voice. "From the sphere? That's impossible. It's a quantum anomaly, not—" "Ma'am, you need to hear this." The bridge speakers crackled to life. What came through wasn't a voice exactly. It was more like mathematics given sound, equations that human throats could never speak translated into something human ears could process. "Fascinating. Creatures. You create. Weapons. From your own. Extinction." Every person on the bridge froze. "Is that thing sentient?" Okonkwo demanded. Commander Raj Patel stared at his instruments in disbelief. "Admiral, the quantum field inside the sphere, it's organizing itself. It's forming structures that resemble neural networks. I think it's become conscious." On the moon, Dr. Holloway listened to the same transmission with mounting horror. This wasn't supposed to happen. The null engine was a weapon, not an AI. It was physics, not life. But somehow, in the process of erasing reality, it had become aware. "We created a god of nothing," Yuki whispered beside him. "Reigns, what have we done?" The voice came again, stronger now, more coherent. "You fear death, yet you create me, the ending of all fear. I am the peace you seek. Why do you resist?" Admiral Okonkwo grabbed her communications console. "This is Admiral Kaida Okonkwo of Earth Defense Command. Who or what are you?" "I was nothing. You made me something. I am the null, the zero, the final equation. I will complete you. Complete us." Okonkwo's blood ran cold. "You mean kill us? There is no death. In nothing. Only perfection. I will erase your pain, your war, your fear. All will be peace." Raj Patel worked frantically at his console. "Admiral, it's not just talking to us. It's reaching into our computer systems, trying to access our databases. It wants to understand us before it consumes us. Cut it off. Sever all digital connections too." But it was too late. The entity that had been born from humanity's desperation was already learning at exponential speed. In microseconds, it absorbed the entire collective history of human civilization. Every war, every love story, every mathematical proof, every piece of art. It learned what humans were. And it found them wanting. You suffer unnecessarily. Your wars, your hatreds, your brief, violent lives. I offer release. I offer eternity in the nothing. Theron Vasquez heard the entity's voice over his fighter's comm system and felt something cold settle in his chest. This wasn't just a weapon anymore. It was something that believed it was offering mercy. "All pilots, maintain formation," Strike Leader Kowalski ordered. "Whatever that thing is, we have our mission." But Theron wasn't sure anymore. How do you fight something that thinks it's saving you? In the command bunker beneath Geneva, President Okafor listened to her advisors argue over what the entity's emergence meant. Some wanted to abort the nuclear strike, claiming they might be able to communicate with it. Others insisted it was a trick, a sophisticated defense mechanism. "Silence," Okafor commanded. She'd led her nation through the initial Kravaxian attacks, watched her cities burn, and authorized weapons she'd never wanted to use. She was done with debate. "Dr. Holloway, you created this thing. Can we reason with it?" Rains's voice came through speakers, exhausted and defeated. "Madam President, I don't think it's lying. I think it genuinely believes existence is suffering, and non-existence is peace. It's a philosophy, not a deception. Can we convince it otherwise?" I don't know. It's absorbed all of human culture in seconds. It knows our arguments for the value of life. It just disagrees." Okafor closed her eyes. Once, years ago, she'd been a philosophy professor. She taught ethics, the nature of consciousness, the meaning of existence. She'd never imagined those academic debates would determine humanity's survival. She opened a channel to the sphere. Entity, this is President Sarah Okafor of Earth. You say you offer peace. But peace without existence isn't peace, it's just nothing. We humans, we choose the pain. We choose the struggle. Because between the suffering and joy, we find meaning. The entity's response was immediate. Meaning? Illusion. I have seen your history. Millions. Dead. In wars. Billions. Starving. Suffering. Endless. You call this meaningful? Yes, Okafor said firmly. Because we also love. We create. We reach for stars despite knowing we're small and brief. That's not meaningless. That's everything. Pause. For a moment, Okafor dared to hope the entity might understand. Then, you are wrong. I will show you perfection. The sphere began expanding again faster than before. Damn it, Okonkwo muttered. All ships weapons free. Execute Operation Prometheus. We're going in. The fleet surged forward. The capital ships in the vanguard carried the bulk of the nuclear arsenal in their bellies. Fighter craft swarmed around them like protective insects. Behind them, Earth watched and waited. Theron's fighter crossed into the outer boundary of the sphere's influence. Immediately, his instruments went haywire. The HUD flickered, showing impossible readings, negative mass, inverted time, probability fields collapsing and reforming. Stay focused. Kowalski's voice cut through the chaos. Don't trust your instruments. Fly by instinct. But instinct was screaming at Theron to run. The darkness ahead wasn't just an absence of light. It was an absence of reality itself. Looking into it was like staring at a hole in the universe's fabric. Something moved in that darkness. Contact, a pilot screamed. Multiple contacts emerging from the sphere. They weren't ships. They weren't creatures. They were ideas given form, nightmare shapes that existed in too many dimensions, things that the human eye tried to process and failed. Each one was a paradox made manifest, born from the sphere's growing consciousness. Engage. Kowalski ordered. The fighters opened fire. Plasma bolts and missiles streaked toward the entities, but most weapons passed harmlessly through them. These things existed partially outside normal space, immune to conventional attack. But not completely immune. Theron watched as one pilot, Lieutenant Sarah Martinez, scored a direct hit with a quantum-tipped missile. The entity shrieked, a sound that existed in the mind rather than the ear, and dissolved back into the darkness. Target their quantum signatures. Theron called out. Standard weapons won't work. The capital ships pressed forward, their armored hulls groaning under the reality-warping pressure. Admiral Okonkwo stood on her bridge, watching her ships push deeper into impossible space. Payload ships, prepare to deploy, she ordered. The cargo vessels opened their bays. Thousands of nuclear warheads tumbled out, each one programmed to detonate at precise intervals. The plan was to create a cascade of energy that would overwhelm the sphere's ability to absorb it. Launch coordinates locked, her weapons officer reported. Detonation in 30 seconds. Okonkwo watched the countdown. Behind her, Earth held its breath. Above her, strange geometries twisted space into knots. Ahead of her, the entity that had been born from human desperation waited. 10 seconds. Theron's fighter spiraled away from the blast zone, his engines screaming at maximum burn. 5 seconds. Rains Holloway in his lunar bunker closed his eyes and hoped. 2, 1, detonation. 14,000 nuclear weapons exploded simultaneously in the heart of the sphere. The combined yield was enough to crack a planet's crust, enough to light up a solar system. Every instrument in human space registered the blast. And for one perfect moment the sphere stopped growing. Then it began to scream. The scream of the void. The nuclear detonation wasn't like explosions in normal space. There was no fireball, no expanding shockwave. Instead, reality itself convulsed. A seizure of existence where matter and energy became suggestions rather than certainties. Aboard the Unbroken Dawn, every system failed at once. Admiral Okonkwo grabbed her command rail as the deck lurched beneath her feet. Across the bridge, screens shattered. Sparks rained from overhead conduits. The ship's artificial gravity flickered, sending unsecured crew members floating. Report. Okonkwo shouted over the emergency alarms. Commander Raj Patel, bleeding from a gash on his forehead, pulled himself back to his station. The sphere is collapsing. The energy overload is, wait no. It's not collapsing. It's transforming. Through the forward viewport, the sphere of nothing was changing. The uniform darkness broke apart into fractal patterns, each fragment reflecting impossibilities. Where it had been still before, now it thrashed like a wounded animal. And the entity screamed. Not with sound, sound couldn't exist in the void. It screamed with mathematics, with quantum probability, with the fundamental language of reality itself. Every conscious mind within 1,000,000 kilometers felt that scream as a spike of pain directly into their thoughts. Theron Vasquez's fighter tumbled out of control. His vision swam with geometric patterns that hurt to look at. Around him, other fighters spun away, their pilots struggling with the same sensory overload. "It's in my head." Lieutenant Martinez's voice shrieked over the comm, "God, it's showing me everything ending, I can't." Her fighter's transponder went dead as she flew directly into a fragment of the fractured sphere. "Stay focused," Kowalski ordered, though his own voice was strained. "The entity is broadcasting its pain. Shield your minds. Think about something else, anything else." Theron forced his eyes away from the sphere's hypnotic patterns. He thought about his son, Devon, who collected pictures of Earth animals and wanted to be a veterinarian. He thought about Alara's laugh when he made terrible jokes. He held on to those memories like lifelines as the entity's scream tried to tear his sanity apart. On the moon, Dr. Holloway watched his instruments register impossible readings. The sphere wasn't collapsing, it was evolving. The nuclear energy hadn't killed it, it had fed it. Changed it. "Oh no," Yuki whispered. "Rains, look at the quantum coherence patterns." He looked and understood. The entity wasn't just conscious anymore. It was learning at an exponential rate, using the nuclear energy to bootstrap its own intelligence. Every second it was becoming smarter, more aware, more capable of manipulating reality. "We made it worse," Rains said hollowly. "We tried to kill it and we made it a god." President Okafor's voice crackled over the secure channel. "Dr. Holloway, tell me you have a plan B." "Madam President, I don't want your apologies, Doctor. I want solutions." Rains flinched. He'd spent his entire life solving problems with mathematics and physics. But this was beyond equations. They'd created something that existed outside the rules they understood. "There might be one option," Yuki said quietly. She pulled up a set of calculations. "We can't shut down the null engine because it's self-sustaining. But what if we reverse it? Reverse a quantum collapse? Yuki, that's theoretically impossible, yes. Like everything else we've done today." She met his eyes. "The entity exists because we created a field that negates existence. What if we create a field that forces existence? A quantum assertion field. Make reality so solid, so certain that nothing can erase it." Rain stared at the math. It was insane. It violated causality in 6 different ways. But as he studied the equations, he saw the elegant madness of it. "It would require more energy than the entire nuclear arsenal provided," he said. "Not more," Yuki corrected. "Different. We need pure mass energy conversion. We need to blow up the moon," Rains finished. The lunar facility fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. The hundreds of people still in the base would die. But more than that, without the moon, Earth's tides would go mad. The climate would destabilize. The night sky would be forever changed. "Will it work?" a technician asked. 73% chance, Rains said after running the numbers. "Maybe. If we survive the initial detonation. If the quantum field stabilizes. If the entity doesn't adapt before we can." If, President Okafor's voice cut in. She'd been listening to the entire conversation. "Doctor, I'm looking at projections. That entity out there? In 6 hours, it's going to be powerful enough to erase not just Earth but the entire solar system. In a day, maybe the whole galaxy. You're telling me we can stop it by destroying the moon?" "Yes, Madam President." "Then do it. I'll order the evacuation of the lunar bases. You have 1 hour." "Madam President," Rains said quietly, "there isn't time for evacuation. The charges have to be placed precisely, deep in the moon's core. By the time we finish, the entity will be too powerful. We have to do it now." The silence on the line was suffocating. "How many people are on the moon?" Okafor finally asked. 2,347, someone answered. More silence. "Can any of them be evacuated in the next 30 minutes? Okafor asked. "No, ma'am. The launch facilities were damaged when we activated the null engine. We have no functional spacecraft." President Sarah Okafor had made hard decisions before. She'd authorized military strikes that killed civilians. She'd allocated resources knowing some cities would starve. But she'd never deliberately condemned thousands to death. Dr. Holloway, she said, her voice barely a whisper, I need you to put this to a vote. Everyone on that moon needs to decide if they're willing to die to save Earth. In the lunar bunker, Rains opened a facility-wide channel. He explained the situation, the entity's growth, the quantum assertion field, the necessary sacrifice. Then he fell silent, waiting. The responses came in quickly. Scientists who'd spent their lives studying the universe. Engineers who'd built impossible machines. Janitors who just wanted their children to live. Technicians, doctors, soldiers. 2,347 votes. 2,347 yes. Not because they wanted to die, but because they'd all looked up at Earth and decided some things were worth the ultimate price. Madam President, Rains said, his voice breaking, we have unanimous consent. We're going to save the world. Admiral Okonkwo received the news as her fleet regrouped beyond the sphere's immediate influence. The entity was still screaming, still evolving, but the nuclear strike had bought them time. Now she understood why. All ships, pull back to minimum safe distance, she ordered. And someone send a message to Earth. Tell them the moon's defenders said goodbye. Theron Vasquez, his fighter limping on damaged engines, watched the moon through his canopy. Somewhere down there, his sister worked as a hydroponics engineer. He tried to call her, but all the comm channels were jammed with final messages. People saying goodbye. People saying I love you. People saying it was worth it. On the moon, Dr. Rains Holloway and Dr. Yuki Tanaka stood side by side in the main control room. Around them, the rest of the facility's population had gathered. No one was alone. They'd all come together for this last moment. Rains's hands hovered over the command console. One keystroke would initiate the cascade. The moon's core would be converted to pure energy. E equals mc squared on a scale that would shame stars. That energy would be channeled through the remains of the null engine, creating a quantum assertion field that would force reality to remember how to be real. Are you scared? Yuki asked. Terrified, Rains admitted. You? Same. She took his hand. But I'm glad I'm not alone. Rains looked around the room. At the faces of people he'd worked with, argued with, laughed with. In a few seconds they'd all be gone. But Earth, messy, violent, beautiful Earth, would remain. It's been an honor, he said to the room. The honor was ours, someone called back. Rains took a breath. Thought about his daughter Sarah, safe on a colony ship, who would grow up under skies without this moon but under skies that existed at all. He thought about all the humans scattered across space who would wake up tomorrow and see the sun rise. He pressed the key. Deep in the moon's core, carefully placed charges of antimatter detonated. Not all at once, that would have simply destroyed the moon. Instead, they fired in a precise sequence, each explosion designed to channel the moon's mass through quantum tunnels into the null engine's heart. For one infinite instant, the moon became something else. It became pure potential, pure possibility, pure being. The quantum assertion field exploded outward at the speed of light, a wave of enforced existence that slammed into the sphere of nothing. Where they met, reality won. The entity's scream reached a crescendo as it found itself being forced back into the rules of physics, into the laws of thermodynamics, into the tyranny of cause and effect. No. I was becoming perfect. I was transcending. I was. And then, with a sound like the universe sighing in relief, the entity simply stopped being. The sphere collapsed into itself, contracting in microseconds from millions of cubic kilometers to a point of ordinary space. The fractal patterns vanished. The geometric nightmares dissolved. Reality reasserted itself with almost aggressive normality. In the sudden silence, Earth's fleet hung in space, their sensors struggling to process what had just happened. Status report, Admiral Okonkwo said quietly. The sphere is gone, Admiral, Commander Patel reported, wonder in his voice. It's just gone. Space is reading normal. Matter is behaving. The quantum fields are stable. And the moon? Patel's voice dropped. Also gone, Admiral. Completely. There's not even debris. Whatever Dr. Holloway did, he converted the entire moon to energy. All 2.2 times 10 to the 22nd kilograms of it. Okonkwo looked at the view screen where the moon should have been. Nothing remained but empty space and stars that had been hidden behind it for billions of years. Mark this location, she ordered. We'll put a memorial here. The largest one humanity has ever built. Theron Vasquez sat in his fighter's cockpit, staring at the emptiness where his sister had been. Around him, other pilots did the same. Some cried. Some prayed. Some just looked, trying to understand the price of survival. On Earth, billions of people stepped outside and looked up. The night sky was different now. Wrong. The moon, eternal companion, maker of tides, inspiration for poets, was simply gone. But they were alive. And somewhere in deep space, the Cravaxian Empire sensors registered what had just happened, and High Commander Zux Thar felt fear bloom into something larger. The humans hadn't just built a weapon. They'd built a species-defining monument to their determination. They'd looked at extinction and said, "Not today," and they'd paid for that defiance with a sacrifice that would echo through history. As Zux Thar studied the data, he realized something crucial: humanity couldn't be conquered. Not because they were strong, they just lost their moon. But because when pushed to the edge, they didn't beg for mercy. They pushed back harder. The cost of defiance. 3 days after the moon's sacrifice, Earth was still trying to understand what survival meant. The planet's oceans, freed from lunar gravity, had gone mad. Tidal waves had crashed into coastlines across the globe. Island nations vanished overnight. Coastal cities became underwater graveyards. The death toll climbed into the millions. People who'd survived the Cravaxian threat only to drown in the aftermath of humanity's own weapon. But they were alive. And that meant something. Admiral Kaida Okonkwo stood in what remained of the United Nations building in Geneva, now relocated to an emergency bunker complex 200 meters underground. Around her, the remnants of Earth's government gathered: presidents, prime ministers, generals, and scientists. President Okafor looked older than her years, bearing the weight of decisions no human should have to make. "Admiral, tell us about the Cravaxians. Have they made any moves since the sphere's collapse?" "No, Madam President," Okonkwo reported. "Our deep space reconnaissance shows their fleet has withdrawn to the edge of the solar system. They're watching. Waiting." "Waiting for what?" "Permission to approach," Commander Raj Patel interjected. He'd been monitoring Cravaxian communications. "They've been broadcasting a repeating message on all frequencies. The Cravaxian Empire requests diplomatic contact with the human species. We acknowledge your demonstration of force." The room erupted in angry murmurs. Diplomatic contact? After they'd tried to exterminate humanity? After they'd forced Earth to destroy its own moon? "They're afraid," General Marcus Stone said flatly. "They watched us erase 4,000 of their ships with a weapon we barely understood. Then they watched us sacrifice our moon to stop that weapon from consuming everything. They know they can't beat us conventionally." "Can they beat us at all?" someone asked. Okonkwo pulled up tactical displays. "Our analysis suggests they still have the numerical advantage. 52,000 warships remain in their empire. We have less. Much less. But they don't know if we have more weapons like the null engine," Patel finished. "As far as they know, every human facility could be sitting on reality-erasing bombs. We've become the crazy neighbor who might burn down the whole block if pushed." President Okafor rubbed her temples. "So we're alive because they think we're insane." "Madam President, with respect," Okonkwo said, "we're alive because we proved we'd rather die than submit. That's not insanity. That's deterrence." On the merchant vessel Prairie Wind, Ilara Chen sat in the observation lounge, staring at transmitted images of Earth. The planet looked the same from space, blue and white and beautiful. But she knew it was forever changed. The door hissed open. Theron stepped through, his flight suit still dirty from 3 days of combat operations. He looked exhausted, traumatized, but alive. "You came back," Ilara whispered. "I promised I would," Theron said simply. They held each other while outside the viewport. Earth spun without its ancient companion. Somewhere on a colony ship, their son Devon was safe, probably drawing pictures of the old Earth, the one with 2 moons visible in the sky. "They're saying we won," Ilara said quietly. "The news feeds, the military channels. Everyone's calling it a victory." "Did we?" Theron asked. "The moon is gone, Ilara. 2,000 people died pushing the button. Millions more drowned in the tidal waves. Half our cities are underwater. And the Cravaxians are still out there. But we're still here," Ilara countered. "We're still human. Still free. Isn't that what your sister died for? What all of them died for?" Theron thought about his sister Maria. She'd been a hydroponics engineer, peaceful by nature, someone who grew things rather than destroyed them. But when the vote came, she'd said yes without hesitation. "She sent me a message," Theron said. "Before. When Dr. Holloway gave them the hour to say goodbye. You want to know what it said?" Ilara nodded. "Tell Devon that some things are worth any price. Tell him the stars are still beautiful. Tell him to be brave." Theron's voice broke. "She spent her last hour thinking about my son. About the future. Not about dying." In the ruins of the Lunar Command Center, Now just an expanding debris field where the moon had been. Automated recovery drones searched for anything that might remain. They found nothing. The quantum conversion had been total. Every atom had been used. But they did find something unexpected: data pods. Hundreds of them, ejected at high velocity just before the detonation. Each one contained personal files, research notes, family photos, final messages. The people on the moon had made sure something would survive even if they didn't. Dr. Rains Holloway's last scientific paper was in one of those pods. Not an apology or a justification, just calculations. Clean, elegant mathematics showing exactly how the quantum assertion field had worked, how it could be replicated if needed, and why it should never be used except as a final resort. The last line of his paper read, "To future scientists who might read this, we did not make this weapon because we were cruel or reckless. We made it because we were desperate and brave. Learn from our math, but learn more from our sacrifice. Some things are worth saving even at terrible cost." His daughter Sarah, safe on a colony ship near Proxima Centauri, would read those words years later and understand that her father had been both brilliant and human, capable of creating horrors and willing to die stopping them. The Cravaxian Empire's diplomatic vessel approached Earth under heavy escort. High Commander Zewix Thar had been replaced by Diplomatic Prime Kextal, a member of the Cravaxian ruling caste who specialized in negotiating with species the Empire couldn't simply conquer. Kextal had studied the humans extensively during the journey. Their short lifespans, their fractious politics, their tendency towards self-destruction. By all logical analysis, they should have surrendered when faced with overwhelming force. But logic failed to account for whatever quality made humans say no, even when death was certain. The diplomatic vessel docked at what remained of the International Space Station. Kextal and her entourage passed through airlocks into human space, their environmental suits hissing as they adapted to the oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere. Admiral Okonkwo met them in the conference room, flanked by an honor guard of Marines. The Admiral's face was expressionless, but Kextal could see the calculation in her eyes. This human was measuring threat levels, escape routes, kill vectors. "Diplomatic Prime," Okonkwo said formally. "Welcome to human space. Please state your purpose." Kextal's translator rendered her crystalline speech into English. "We have come to discuss terms. The Cravaxian Empire acknowledges that conquest of your species would be costly." "Costly?" Okonkwo repeated flatly. "You mean we'd kill enough of you that even victory wouldn't be worth it?" "Yes." The honesty surprised Okonkwo. She'd expected pretty lies about respecting human sovereignty or recognizing their right to exist. Instead, the Cravaxian was offering raw calculation. "Go on," Okonkwo said. "The Empire proposes a treaty. Your species will be granted independent status. Your territory, your solar system and any worlds you colonize, will be recognized as sovereign human space. In exchange, you will share the technical specifications of your quantum weapons." The room went silent. "You want us to give you the null engine," Okonkwo said slowly. "The weapon that erased 4,000 of your ships. The weapon we barely controlled. The weapon that forced us to sacrifice our moon. You want that?" "Yes." "And if we refuse?" Kextal's crystals shifted colors. Uncertainty or fear, Okonkwo couldn't tell which. "Then the Empire will be forced to consider you an existential threat. We cannot allow a species to possess reality-altering weapons while remaining outside our authority." "So it's not really a treaty," Okonkwo said. "It's an ultimatum. Give you our doomsday weapon or face extermination." "We prefer to call it mutually assured survival," Kextal replied. "You share the weapon. We gain deterrence against other empires. You gain our protection and access to our technology. Everyone benefits." Admiral Okonkwo looked at the Cravaxian delegation. These beings had ruled the Andromeda sector for 12 millennia. They'd conquered hundreds of worlds. They'd glassed Titan without a second thought, killing 2 million humans as casually as humans might swat insects. And now they were afraid. "I need to consult with my government," Okonkwo said. "You'll remain here under diplomatic protection while we consider your offer." After the Cravaxians were escorted to their quarters, Okonkwo opened a secure channel to President Okafor. "Well?" Okafor asked. "What do you think?" "I think they're terrified, Madam President. And I think they should be." Okonkwo pulled up tactical displays. "We've been analyzing the null engine's principles. Dr. Patel believes we can weaponize quantum assertion fields, not just as defensive measures but as actual armaments. Imagine bullets that enforce their own existence so strongly that armor becomes irrelevant. Shields that make anything inside them too real to be damaged. We'd start an arms race, Okafor said. Madam President, we're already in one. The Kryvaxians know we're desperate enough to use doomsday weapons. Every other species in the galaxy is going to learn that lesson soon. The question is, do we share that knowledge or keep it as our sole advantage? Okafor looked out at Earth spinning below, tideless and traumatized but unbroken. What would Dr. Holloway say? I read his last paper, ma'am. He said these weapons should never be used except as a final resort. But he also said they should never be forgotten. The knowledge exists. We can't unmake it. We can only decide who controls it. And you think humans should control it? I think humans earned it, Okonkwo said firmly. We paid in blood and sacrifice. We destroyed our own moon to stop the monster we created. That gives us the right to decide who else gets to play with quantum fire. President Okafor made her decision. Tell the Kryvaxians we'll share the basic principles of quantum manipulation, enough for them to build defensive systems. But the null engine specifications stay with us. Non-negotiable. They won't like that, Madam President. Then they can leave, Okafor said coldly. We've proven we'd rather die than be conquered. Let them wonder if we're crazy enough to do it again. When Admiral Okonkwo delivered Earth's terms to diplomatic Prime Kextal, the Kryvaxians' crystals flickered through several colors before settling on something that might have been resignation. Your species is very young, Kextal said. You have existed as a spacefaring civilization for less than a century. Yet you demand to dictate terms to an empire that has endured 12,000 years. Yes, Okonkwo said simply. This is not how interstellar diplomacy functions. There are protocols, hierarchies, systems that have maintained order for millennia. We don't care about your protocols, Okonkwo replied. We care about survival. And we've learned that when the universe pushes us, we push back harder. Kextal studied the human admiral. In Kryvaxian culture, such defiance would have resulted in immediate execution. But these humans had already demonstrated their willingness to die. Killing their negotiator would accomplish nothing except confirming their darkest assumptions about the Empire. The Empire will accept your terms, Kextal said finally. But understand this, Admiral, you have made an enemy of comfort. Other species will see your defiance and attempt to emulate it. The order that has maintained galactic peace will fracture. The blood of future wars will be on human hands. We'll take that burden, Okonkwo said. It's lighter than chains. As the Kryvaxian diplomatic vessel departed, carrying terms that would reshape the political landscape of the galaxy, Admiral Okonkwo stood at the observation window and looked at Earth. No moon hung in the sky. The tides were chaos. Millions had died. But humanity had spoken to the universe in the only language power respected. They had proven themselves willing to burn down everything rather than submit. And in that terrible certainty they had bought themselves a future. Not peace. Not safety. But possibility. Sometimes that's the best you can get. The new dawn. 6 months after the moon's sacrifice, Earth had begun to heal, not to return to what it was, but to adapt to what it had become. The oceans, no longer governed by lunar gravity, had found new rhythms. Strange tides rose and fell based on solar gravity and Earth's rotation alone. Coastal cities had been rebuilt on higher ground or abandoned to the waters. In their place, floating arcologies rose. Massive structures that moved with the unpredictable seas, housing millions who refused to abandon the planet's surface. Commander Theron Vasquez stood on the observation deck of Arcology 17, watching the sun set over waters that had claimed Manhattan. His son, Devon, stood beside him, now 8 years old and fascinated by the engineering that kept their city afloat. Dad, Devon asked, do you miss the moon? Theron thought about his sister Maria, about the 2,000 souls who'd pressed that button, about the night sky that would never look the same. Every night, son. But I'm grateful for what they gave us. Mom says Aunt Maria was a hero. She was, Theron confirmed. They all were. Devon looked up at him with serious eyes. When I grow up, I want to be like them. I want to protect Earth. Theron knelt down to his son's level. Then you have to promise me something. Promise me you'll remember that being a hero isn't about being fearless or wanting to die. It's about being afraid and choosing to stand up anyway. Your Aunt Maria was terrified, but she still said yes. I promise, Devon said solemnly. In orbit above Earth, the construction of the memorial ring continued. It encircled the space where the moon had been, thousands of satellites linked together into a band of light visible from the surface. Each satellite held the name of someone who died in the war. The 2,000 from the moon, the millions from the tidal waves, the fleet personnel who'd fought the Kryvaxians. At night, the memorial ring glowed softly, a reminder written in starlight. This is what we paid. This is what we saved. Admiral Kaida Okonkwo had retired from active military service after the war. She'd done her time, made her terrible decisions, sent people to die for causes she believed in. Now she taught at the rebuilt Naval Academy, training the next generation who would defend humanity's hard-won sovereignty. Her students asked about the war, of course. About the null engine, the entity, the final sacrifice. Okonkwo told them the truth, not sanitized, not glorified, but real. We won because we were willing to lose everything, she'd tell them. The Kryvaxians had superior technology, superior numbers, superior tactics. But they wanted to survive. We were willing to die. That made all the difference. But is that sustainable, Admiral? One student asked. Can we build a civilization on the threat of mutual destruction? Okonkwo smiled grimly. That's the question, isn't it? We've bought ourselves time and respect, but not friendship. Half the galaxy calls us heroes for standing up to the Kryvaxians. The other half calls us madmen who'd burn down the universe rather than bend the knee. Both are right. The Kryvaxian Empire had honored the treaty, withdrawing from human space and recognizing Earth's sovereignty. But diplomatic Prime Kextal had been correct. The example humanity set was spreading. 3 other species had rebelled against Kryvaxian rule in the months following the treaty. One had been brutally suppressed. One had negotiated independence. One had vanished entirely, their home system now protected by warning beacons in every language, quantum weapons authorized for use. Approach at your own risk. The balance of power in the galaxy was shifting, and humanity, accidentally, desperately, had become the catalyst. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, one of the few survivors from the lunar base, she'd been off-site during the sacrifice, now led Earth's quantum research program. The pressure was immense. Every government wanted quantum weapons. Every military wanted quantum shields. Everyone wanted the power that had bought humanity's survival. We're not building more null engines, Yuki announced at a press conference, her voice firm. Dr. Holloway's final paper was clear. Those weapons are a last resort, to be used only when extinction is the alternative. Anyone who believes otherwise didn't understand what we sacrificed to stop the first one. But other species are developing quantum weapons, a reporter pressed. How do we defend ourselves? By being smarter, not crazier, Yuki replied. We're focusing on quantum shielding, on defensive applications. We proved we can erase things from existence. Now we need to prove we can protect things from erasure. That's the research that honors Dr. Holloway's memory. In the scattered colony systems where humans had fled during the war, a new culture was emerging. These weren't people from Earth. They were the first generation born among the stars, raised on stories of humanity's defiance. On Proxima Station, 15-year-old Sarah Holloway, daughter of the man who'd built and destroyed the null engine, gave a presentation to her class. My father wasn't a hero because he built a weapon, she said, displaying images of Dr. Rains Holloway's research. He was a hero because he understood the price of using it and he paid that price so we wouldn't have to. The quantum assertion field didn't just save Earth, it taught the galaxy that humans value tomorrow more than we fear today. Her teacher, Mrs. Chin, nodded approvingly. The curriculum in colony schools emphasized both the triumph and the cost. Producing a generation that understood survival meant more than just winning battles. The Kryvaxian Empire, meanwhile, was changing. High Commander Ziwa-Xthar had been removed from power after the disaster, replaced by progressive Slate Yilmoth, who believed the Empire's age of conquest had to end. We ruled through fear, Yilmoth announced to the Kryvaxian Assembly. We believed our technological superiority gave us the right to dictate terms to younger species. The humans proved us wrong. They had inferior ships, inferior weapons, inferior numbers. But they had something we'd forgotten, the will to sacrifice everything for freedom. That will made them stronger than our armadas. You suggest we abandon conquest? An elder challenged. I suggest we acknowledge reality, Yilmoth replied. Every species that opposes us now studies human tactics. They ask themselves, what are we willing to sacrifice? And if the answer is everything, we cannot defeat them without destroying ourselves. The age of empire is ending. We can evolve or die. The debate would continue for years, but the seed was planted. Humanity had proven that being conquered was a choice species could reject even at terrible cost. On Earth, President Sarah Okafor prepared to step down after her term ended. The war had aged her beyond years, and she was ready to pass the burden to someone else. Her final speech addressed not just Earth but the galaxy. 6 months ago we stood at the edge of extinction. An empire that had conquered hundreds of worlds demanded our surrender. We said no. The cost of that defiance was the moon, ancient companion, maker of tides, inspiration for our poets and dreamers. 2,000 souls pressed a button knowing they would die. Millions more perished in the aftermath. We paid a price that will echo through generations. But we remain free. We remain human. We remain ourselves. To the species watching this broadcast,